Hey, everybody. It's Chris with New to the Game podcast here with Ben Schneider.
What is that?
How are you doing tonight, Ben?
Dude, I'm doing pretty good. I feel fresh, ready to attack the day. Clear-minded. How about yourself?
About the same. Definitely hit snooze on the alarm this morning, but it's still 5:30 a.m. my time, so a little bit earlier, but I am excited. Got a bunch of stuff planned for the day. So Ben, today, what we wanted to talk about is you recently hired your first full-time sales position. And I would love to talk to you about kind of what that looks like and how you got to that point. I think is even more important because hiring a salesperson is definitely a huge decision. But I feel like I feel like it's a really common question that you and I both seen people ask is when is it time to hire a salesperson? How do you pick a salesperson? How do you find a person that matches what you need? So I think to start off with, so you made this hire now, obviously, but walk me through what day-to-day life looked like before you had this person when it comes to your sales process, and kind of guide us in the direction of where you got to that made you realize this position needed to be created.
Yeah. So it was last year. Sales probably occupied, I would say, 50 to 75% of my schedule. So I would generally be working 20 to 30 hours a week on sales, driving hundreds of miles every single day, if not many hundred every month, every week, and going to consultations, trying to be able to manage both consultations but also lead handling. So I was doing a lot, and last year was definitely a year where I sort of stretched myself thin, sort of on purpose, because I wanted to be able to kind of test some boundaries, test some limits for myself. And when it came time to make the hire, it was one of those hires that I knew at my core made sense, because it was like, okay, my time is stretched very, very thin right now. I'm doing a million different things. Our company is growing, our lead flow is growing. The ability to simply like manage the lead flow and like book appointments and do that well, while equally also managing the sales appointments themselves, which were consuming, again, the grand majority of my time, were it was just so much stuff all at once. And so seeing the natural scale and growth of my company, I mean, there were points when I was running 15 to 20 appointments a week and or 25 appointments a week. So that typically would equate to 4 to 5 appointments per day, sometimes more than that. And it just was, I kind of reached a tipping point where it's like, I cannot functionally maintain my schedule. I can't functionally build the business while equally still being able to show up as a very effective and competent salesperson as well as a lead handler. I was playing like 4 different roles inside of the company that were all roles that could be hired, and I'm actively hiring for now. So the salesperson hire just it was a very practical next step, especially if I was able to find a salesperson that could really get out there and just crush it. Um, that was kind of the big, I think the bottleneck for me was reaching a point where it's like, man, I really want to hire a salesperson, or hire maybe more than one salesperson. Like a lot of people will encourage hiring a sale, like starting with a small sales team, maybe 2 or 3. And it was ultimately just I had to be able to determine what did I actually have the capacity for as far as training, what kind of processes did I have in place, and would it be fruitful for me to hire someone that was a little bit more green, or someone that was a little bit more experienced that could come in and pretty rapidly be able to, like, with a little bit of training, be able to step into the fold and be the guy that we need him to be pretty rapidly. And I opted for the latter just because it made, for where I was at in business, it made a lot more functional sense for what I'm trying to build.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So to clarify just a little bit, I know you were saying you wore a lot of hats. I remember talking to you on a lot of days during that time period where it seemed like you had 4 different jobs, 5 different jobs, and you were doing a ton of different things every day. So just to tell the folks out there listening if you are a one-man show, I know that wasn't the case for you because you already had your office manager at that point still, right?
Yeah, we had a
Or
project manager.
sorry,
Yeah,
project manager.
I did cycle through an office manager last year for about a 4 to 6 month period. That was relatively short lived. Ultimately, just wasn't the right fit and not the right time. But that being said, yeah. So it was really a team of two ultimately between myself and my project manager.
Okay, so let me ask you this for all the folks listening. Do you feel like as a one-man solo operator that there would be a time where a salesman would be the first hire like a company makes if it's just a solo operator that's growing rapidly? Or do you feel like that project manager slash office manager for some people or most people would probably come first?
I'd probably say the latter. I mean, I'm inclined to say the latter. The office manager, the administrative person, but that's more anecdotal simply just because I know the nature of our industry is oftentimes that it's a tradesman stepping into a business owner role. Mine was a little bit different. I was a salesman stepping into a business owner role, so I didn't
Mhm.
have like the trade skill necessarily. Not that I didn't know how to do it or I wasn't able to be competent enough to be a project manager, but for me it made a lot more sense because I was organizationally I was really it was an area where I was actually hurting the company by being a project manager. So that hire
Yeah.
definitely was like the next step. I mean, when it comes to it's a nuanced answer because when it comes to I feel like a business that's in that one man shop place, they're doing a lot of things and it really is about it's a numbers decision in my opinion.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a number slash do you have the systems, do you have the leadership processes in place or at least the leadership style in place to be able to train an effective person? I think if a salesperson is going to be one of your early hires, then I would very strongly be of the opinion that like you need to have really really strong accountability structures in place or just know that the person like have some and it's possible you just simply may not but like have some degree of perspective that like you're hiring an absolute like winner that you trust greatly. You have to have a huge amount of trust for a salesperson. And because you and I both have heard stories of people recently that have hired salespeople and it just been in like an absolute shit show. And so I think it's a position that requires an immense amount of mindfulness before you hire that position because it's very easy to be very gung ho about it. And maybe you're of the mindset that you can fail forward through that, which I think is great if you can afford to do so. I know a lot of people that have also gone the route where they typically churn through 3 to 4 salespeople before they find the salespeople. However, if you can mitigate that at all, that's I would consider that to be a favorable approach is avoiding the having to hire and fire a bunch of people and if you can avoid having to pay for all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, awesome. Well, let's push forward a little bit and kind of change gears. So you get to the point where you know that the salesman is the next role that you need. I know that it can be challenging to get to that point, but do you feel like do you feel like you want to talk any more about that? Because I feel like that is the hardest part for a lot of people about just deciding that you have gotten to the point where you want to make that hire. Do you feel like you want to dig into further like what you were seeing day to day that made you realize that that needed to happen besides just that you felt like you weren't effective in multiple positions? Is there anything else that you saw in your company day to day or that you saw on a regular basis that made you realize, shit, I need to do this now versus
Yeah.
I can wait 6 months? Because I feel
Yeah,
like when
I
I
mean,
talk to people about this, that's the hardest part is just making
yeah.
the decision of it's time to do this now.
Yeah. I think you have to have a great amount of trust in yourself for that decision to be made. A trust in yourself because I mean ultimately salesmen especially while as motivated and commission based salespeople and hiring for that position they typically are, there's also an innate tendency for them to go to the lowest hanging fruit and we call it the gravy train and ride that as rapidly as they can. And if the gravy train runs out, the salespeople burn out and then they just are like, oh, the environment sucked. Obviously, you want to hire someone that has a high degree of self accountability, which I think is super important. However, I think to be able to have a pre existing standard set within the company that says, I am going to show up and I am going to be able, as the leader of this company, my standard will always be the one that is higher than the company. It's going to be setting the tone for the rest of the company. If you are not at a place where I think you can successfully show up to this preset standard that you have set for what showing up looks like for your company, it's gonna create a tough environment. Not that you, again, it's never in a situation where you can't do it. It's never so simple where it's like, oh, you just cannot hire a salesperson if you don't have that structure. But you will run into a lot of, I think, obstacles and hurdles that you don't necessarily have to if you have the accountability in the values and the standards set already. As far as like placement and when to hire a salesperson, it I am of the opinion that once you get to a point where I would say, I mean, I guess it would be easy to put a revenue number on it. I don't know if that's a that's not going to be a perfect science. So I would probably say when you get to a point where it would be more valuable to have someone that is 100% dedicated to the sales position, someone that can sell. For us, it was we needed someone that could sell at a greater profit margin because I was failing at being able to sell effectively at a lower profit margin, and I wanted to increase that. So like being able to figure out how was I needed someone who had that kind of that tenacity to be able to be after it, but then also someone who could give their dedicated attention to every appointment and not have that feeling. Like one of the things that I often did is I realized very early when I hired my salesperson is my preset booking appointments were 50 minutes long. So I would book a 50-minute appointment and then I would book a 50-minute appointment after. Normally the 10 minutes between there was explicitly for like drive time essentially. So I was able to get out there and wrap up appointments within 50 minutes. And a lot of times there wouldn't be much of like a closing conversation because more often than not, I mean, part of it was like I just didn't want to have that closing conversation. Other times it was also just originated in the fact that like I didn't have the time. I knew that I didn't have the time. I had to get back on the phone. I had to get back to business. I had to get back to building things. And so when I got to a place where I was stretched so thin that like I couldn't actually give quality of attention to the people that I was selling, even though I was, again, I like to think I'm a pretty reasonably good salesperson. Like I can show up and I establish a good, healthy amount of trust with people when I'm out there. But I did ultimately realize like that was not the best use of my time. I was missing the mark as a salesperson because I was having to field all these other business tasks that were, I won't say of greater importance, but equal importance. And I found myself very, very scattered. And so what ended up happening is that my closing ability, we'll say my closing ratio from a metric perspective, started to go down. I wasn't selling as many jobs with the people that I was giving. I was being presented with people who were ready to buy, that were interested. They had inquired. They were like ready to go. They were definitely going to be doing a project. And I was still failing to sell them. And so the more that I started to observe that happening, I was like, okay, a person who is any trained person that would listen to any trained salesperson that would listen to this would say that, okay, the people that I talk to on a regular basis are the quote unquote gravy train. They are the people that have money in their hands, that have inquired. They might already even have some price expectation in place and they're ready to go. Obviously, we're probably going to still be higher than that number, but they're still ready to go. So a good trained salesperson should be able to, given the proper tools, be able to sell those people. And I reached a threshold where I wasn't effectively selling those people anymore. And I knew that in order for us to grow, in order for us to really start to lean into the growth phase that we're in right now, I needed to be able to prioritize my attention, and I needed to be able to have someone who had prioritized attention towards exclusively focused on closing and selling. And so from a like very thoughtful process, that's sort of how I ultimately got to that decision. And then the harder obstacle that I ran into, it was less about like when is the right time to find a salesperson. I definitely knew that it was right time because I felt the stretch and the tension and I saw the numbers. It then became about, okay, how am I going to find the right salesperson? And that I think was probably the harder part of the conversation.
Well, funny story. That leads into my next question. So you got to this point in business. You realized that this position was not only something that you wanted to hire, but it was something that the company truly needed. You realized that it was going to be a huge part of the next step and phase and kind of area of growth in your company. Realizing the importance and the gravity of that position, how did you start creating, like either putting on paper, an idea of who and what you wanted to hire? Because I think that is also a huge question that we get a lot, which is if you're now at the point where you're going to hire a salesman, how do you build the job description, put the criteria together, and brainstorm the kind of person that you would want to hire? Like, what were some of the things you were thinking of when you started down that road with this position initially?
So the exact thing that you just described, yeah, I mean, it's like, who do you want to hire?
Mhm.
If you could hire the perfect salesperson, what would have to be true about that person for you to hire them? And yeah, so I mean, it started off from I sort of a personality perspective. I was like, what is the type of personality that I actually want to hire? I didn't want to hire someone that was like, I didn't want to hire, I ultimately didn't want to hire someone that was green, someone that was like
Mhm.
brand spanking new to the industry, into the sales or anything like that. I knew that that wasn't the type of person that I was going to feel equipped to be able to train up and put into a position where they could be ultimately successful. It wasn't my greatest skill set. So I was like, I would rather pay someone a large amount of money and know that through a thorough vetting process that I was going to be getting someone that was going to be thoroughly equipped to be able to show up and absolutely dominate. And so from a personality perspective, I definitely wanted someone that had sort of that competitive edge to them, someone that like had almost their own standard that they were competing against. Because if I was going to just hire one salesperson, it's not like they're going to have a perfect competition inside of the company to work against. They're going to have to kind of create their own competition. So
Mhm.
competing against themselves, competing against like what is the next level that I can hit was really critical to me. So I knew I
Mhm.
wanted someone that kind of had that athlete mindset. Um, After that, it became more about, okay, what are the driving factors that I want to be like, what are the outputs that I expect from this person? Is it simply that they go out, like, do I want them to be generating leads? Do I want them to be like very passionate about business development? So more, again, more in the realm of like generating leads and new opportunities and stuff like that. Do I base my commission structure off of that? Or do I want a person that can go out there and be an absolute sniper in the field and just like I give them all of my appointments and they go out there and they sell all of the appointments and
Mhm.
they get paid very generously for just being able to sell extremely effectively. And then is the commission tier more based upon like commission structure, maybe more based upon like the profitability range that they sell within. So I opted. I initially had actually made a hiring decision that was geared more towards the former, so more towards the business development person, and then that ultimately fell through. The person just didn't they didn't commit to it entirely. So I had to pivot, and that's where I found the next person who is our current salesperson now, and far more of the latter part of that. That I wanted, they were the competitive mind. They were the person that wanted to get out there. They wanted to be able to show off their skills to the highest degree in a very hyper focused way. Like they didn't want to play quarterback, receiver, and running back. They wanted to play quarterback because that's what they were really good at. And so for me, it then became that actually made it easier for me because I was like, okay, he's a very good salesperson. He's a very good closer. He has that competitive edge.
Mhm.
All I have to do as the coach, then, instead of trying to develop like this system where he can thrive in every single role and position him perfectly in all these different ways, it became more about, okay, how do I just simply draw up the best possible plays so he can be able to absolutely dominate? And so now the structure is it's a profitability structure. If he sells between 40 and 45%, he gets a 3% commission. If he sells between 45 and 50%, which I would describe as the target range, he gets a 6% commission. If he sells less than 40, it's zero. And if he sells more than 50, he is able to essentially, we split that profit in half and he earns any additional profit, 50% of any additional profit beyond 50%.
Mhm.
Um, so it's you need a spreadsheet to calculate it. It's not the easiest of calculations, but the spreadsheet's dialed in. But it's enabling him to go out there and if he wants to sell a job at 60% and like absolutely just freaking create a huge margin there, he's able to successfully do so and be enabled to do so. And be almost encouraged to do so because he's able to earn a little bit more. And so, what it kind of does, and since I've been really thorough in building out a very replicable, is replicable a word? I think we know what I mean by that, but like
Replicable. Yeah, that's a word.
replicable,
Yeah,
yeah,
I believe so.
replicatable. I don't know.
No,
Regardless,
it's replicable.
replicable. That sounds like a great word. So I needed to create a very replicable estimating process, so that way when he gets out there, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for him to miss the mark with
Mm-hmm.
estimating. I wanted to make sure it was very simplified for him, so I didn't need someone that was like extraordinarily exceptional with numbers necessarily. He just needed to be able to like follow the system that I put in place. So there was
Yep.
accountability within the estimating, so I'm not getting screwed there. There was a very generous commission structure. So I wanted him to be able to, I wanted my commission structure to be so high that it truly attracted the high performers that were like, wow,
Mm,
that is a can't miss opportunity if I can just show up and be the best thing that I can be there.
yep.
Because I knew that was the type of person that I wanted to attract. And then finally, I wanted it to be set up in a way where when he gets out there, again, like it basically creates as much integrity for the company. And I don't want to say low risk necessarily, because there's inevitably a risk when you're giving all of your appointments to a person. But I did want to create a way where it's like even the floor of this position is still pretty dang good for the company. It's still a technical win for our company. And so structuring the position that way made it more so I could really just focus my efforts on, can I find the best possible person for this role, as opposed to the structure of it. I built the structure out so that way it just became easy for that person to show up, step in, and not feel like we had to do all of this like figuring out of like what's the perfect puzzle piece to make this person successful.
Yep. Totally understand. Cool, man. Well, I feel like that is a ton of information. I feel like the only other thing that I really wanted to ask you to make sure the viewers had a chance to listen to was, you've made this decision to hire your salesman. You've figured out the type of person that you want to hire. Now you've made this hire and you have this person starting on Monday and it's Wednesday afternoon. Assuming that you have not spent as much time as you should have preparing. I know you didn't do this, but let's talk about the theoretical situation for the viewers. What are the 3 to 5 most important systems, SOPs, procedures, whatever, that you so far, having onboarded and trained this person, realized you have to have in order for them to be successful?
An estimating procedure. They need to know how to build an estimate, and they need to, if you have an ideal system or pre-built formulas inside of your estimating software. Again, we use JobTread. It's phenomenal. You can do all of that. It allows it to be very easy, like kind of plug and play essentially. So like a plug and play estimating system, SOP, whatever you want to call it, is I personally, it's a non-negotiable for me. I understand if it's not your cup of tea of like getting into that deep into your systems, but man, it's a freaking game changer when you can just be able to enable and empower your guy to be able to just get out there and just freaking make it so easy for him. That's huge. Um, Simplify. You need a system for tracking commission. Commission tracking has actually been pretty complex, and it has not been easy. So making sure that you ideally have a system built for your commission tracking prior to this person really getting out there and actually closing deals, it's going to save you a lot of headache. It's so much easier to, because again, this is in many ways, it's a money performance oriented motivated person. So you want to be able to make sure that there's not any, it could be very, I can see, because I have a pretty good system and I'm already seeing weaknesses within it. I could see how not having that structure in place would be absolutely chaotic and create a lot of just kind of sort of some of distrust, because the salesperson wants to make sure that he's earning the right commission. The business owner wants to make sure that he's paying the right commission, not paying too much, maybe not paying too little. And neither person wants to be on either end of the too much or too little, because then you kind of get like clashing heads. So getting that dialed in, I think I would consider that to be a critical piece, because it's gonna save you a lot of that distrust and say, hey, okay, the system's here. This is what it looks like. And then I would probably say I would set some goals for that person. I think having some preset goals would be very valuable. Some like benchmarks of like, this is what success looks like. This is what exceptional success looks like. And then the sky's the limit. And so having those kind of conversations has been really helpful for my salesperson, because I want him to know first, on the back end, he has every ounce of support and desire from the company that he is successful as possible. Because ultimately, if he is super successful, we are equally as successful. So I want to make sure that he believes that with his whole heart. And then with that, making sure that he knows that if he goes out there and he shows up and he's consistent and he does what needs to be done, he's going to get everything that he needs to be able to do that successfully. So accountability structure, I think, is going to be really important. Being able to say, okay, this is really what we expect of you, but also creating like some lofty goals for him to hit. Because
Mhm.
my opinion is that if you hire an A-player salesperson, that they are going to want to be graded, they're going to want to be ranked, and they're going to want to be able to see what their performance metrics are because they want to excel.
Yep.
And so being able to, my initial expectation for this year was a lot lower than what it ended up being now because I have the salesperson in place. Because he is, by having him in here, by having him be like so aggressive after some certain goals, it's created space for me to be like, all right, man, look, if you were gonna dump the fuel on the fire, then I am going to, as diligently as possible, make sure that I am tending to this flame as best as I can, because I want him to be able to reach as far as he can reach. I want to
Yep.
enable him to do that. The worst thing that I think you could do is bottleneck your best people by not being as aggressive in pursuit of their own success. And I think it's been a huge seasonal change for me as a leader, is like me being able to kind of get the scales out of my eyes to be able to see that, like, if I can make my people as successful as possible through their lens, their own, we'll say, selfish lens, but they
Mhm.
are as successful as they possibly can be, and I create a system where that success correlates to my success, that is
Mhm.
a winning formula. And I want to be able to be as aggressive as possible on that mission.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the way you put that because it's one of the reasons why so many people in home service and the trades are switching to performance-based pay for technicians these days. It's the same kind of thing. If you can find a system that directly ties your employees' performance to company performance and your employees' success to company success, and create a culture where my employee winning means that I win, and the company and me winning means that they win. Oh man, that's the secret to success. Because
Yeah.
if you have that much buy-in from your office employees, salesmen, crew in the field, if they all know that their success is directly tied to the company's success and vice versa, man, I feel like that is the secret to growth, the secret to
And
longevity, the secret to culture.
everyone needs to be convinced of that.
Hmm.
Everyone has to be convinced of that, because we live in a world of scarcity mindset that says someone has to win
Hmm.
and someone has to lose.
Yep.
Someone is being more profitable and another person is kind of getting cut off. Like they're getting the
Yep.
short end of the stick with that. And if we can create an environment where, again, everyone wins through everyone's eyes, our
Mhm.
mission is big enough where everyone can win through it. That is a victory mentality, and I want to empower that as much as I possibly can, because again, that seems to me, as far as the fruit that I have seen thus far, has been ingredients to incredible success. And success
Mhm.
and not in like a goal driven success, but like success and like momentum and progress is being made in a direction that I am super thrilled about. And I don't know ultimately where exactly that's going to go. We're having conversations about where that's going to lead to, and I'm excited about that, because that, again, it's a formula I haven't really played with much, and now that I'm playing with it, I'm like, wow, this is truly like the opposite of scarcity mindset being the abundance mindset, where
Mhm.
everyone can win. um it's exciting, it's thrilling to be a part of that environment. It makes people want to be inside of that environment and excited to be there,
Yeah.
and we're experiencing it.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Oh, all right. So I I am out of questions. So I feel like we covered a lot. I feel like we're at 30 minutes, so we definitely got a lot of info out there. But before we wrap up, before we call it a day, is there anything else about this process, all the way from the beginning where we were talking about what it looks like to be ready to hire a salesman, to creating the position, to building the systems, and then creating the culture and the feel every day that you want for this person in your company? Do you feel like there's anything else that you left open or unfinished or that you want to talk to the viewers about?
Just be painfully honest with them. I mean, create an environment where you can be brutally honest with each other. I think that if you can begin to set the tone for that, salespeople, unfortunately, the nature of the sales industry, which everyone knows, like people hate to be sold to. It's the nature of the industry is that there's a lot of dishonesty and there's a lot of like subtle dishonesty. So I would prioritize radical honesty in every way possible from day zero to day infinity, because if you can have radical honesty with your salespeople and they can feel the space and safety to be able to have radical honesty with you, again, that's another ingredient to that winning formula, because then you're actually playing with what the way I articulate it is that you're playing with real problems as opposed to fabricated, like nuanced problems that don't really seem to make sense because you're not dealing with actual honesty. So if you can make sure that you're creating an environment of radical honesty, it's powerful.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, I feel like we can wrap up. I guess two last things. One is, do you want to give your salesman a shout out since he listens to our podcast?
Yeah, Curtis, love you, man. You're a freaking beast. I talked to him yesterday, and I was like, man, the best way that I could describe it. Like I use this word, I use this language with him. I call him a sniper, because he's like he went out and he closed 8 out of 8 deals the other day, and like over a 2-day period. He's on a roll, and
that's awesome.
It makes me so excited. It makes me excited to be. And again, I guess this is sort of a humble brag, but like I'm excited to be in a leadership position where my success, what I envision my own success being, is seeing Curtis be insanely successful, seeing my team like Iris and the others be extremely successful. And that is, it feels extremely meaningful, more meaningful than any selfish ambition that I ever had prior to.
Awesome, man. All right, well, we will wrap up. Thank you guys all for listening and tuning into this most recent episode. A couple of things. We still have a free group on Skool, SKOOL. I have, to be totally honest, not been great about posting and keeping up on it. However, the last week I've been working on creating some content for that and putting things back into our Skool group. We would love for anybody who's listening that is interested in working with us to come join that free community for lots of different people. We kind of at the beginning said it was for young entrepreneurs that wanted to join the home service space, but there is a way wider variety of people in there already. So anybody that's interested in what we're doing, how we're doing it, and wants to come hang out with us and talk and learn and be a part of that community, come on over and join. Link will be in the show notes. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, a whole bunch of other podcast platforms, and YouTube. And you can find both of us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram. And we would love to chat with you regardless. So thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you guys on the next one.
See y'all.